G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here with a new build series. This time we're in the Legend of the Galactic Heroes series, and this is a 1/8000 scale version of the Brünhild. Now it's put out by a company called HMA Toys, who I've never sort of built anything from, so I have no idea what this kit's like. So first of all, let's have a look what's in the box. Before I open up this box, just a little bit of a look around. It actually gives you 2 copies of the kit, so you get sort of 2 for the price of 1. And my understanding is that there's only the only real difference is the decal that goes on the bottom. So we've got what's that? Lowengram Dynasty and Goldenbaum Dynasty. So yeah, you get 2 versions of essentially the same kit, where the only difference is the decals. But they give you a colour call out on the back, so using Mr. Colour. And this box opens up on the side. Okay, that's interesting. So everything's wrapped in bubble wrap. We've got a, looks like a set of instructions and the decals. We'll have a look at those in a minute. So I've just double checked. You do get 2 versions of each sprue. So you can see there's a duplicate here. And then you get these 2 sprues, which are a duplicate. So let's have a look at them. Okay, so this is the first one. You know, there's a little bit of detail in there. It appears just, you know, I mean, it's a little bit soft in places, but you know, you got to remember I'm sort of used to doing the Bandai Mecha Collar collection stuff. And the other thing to consider is that this thing is a monster. Like in the show, it's like over 1 kilometre long, if I remember rightly. So it's a big spaceship. Looks like we've got some thrusters go at the back here, side details. Thankfully, this front part looks as though it has a little bit of detail on it. So yeah, I think with some panel lines and, you know, some decent painting, it should be okay. Now, if we have a look at this other sprue, we've got the 2 different versions. And it kind of amazes me they've gone down this path, because they've actually embossed the 2 different logos on each of the whole bottoms here. They could have maybe saved themselves a little bit of money just by having them blank, I guess, but I'll probably end up shaving that off, because I think in the anime, I don't remember them being embossed like that. It was just sort of an image. And you kind of think at 1/8000th scale, this thing probably, you know, even if it did have this embossed logo, it wouldn't have been embossed that far. This looks like parts for the stand, so it does come with 2 stands. I won't be using the stand, I'll make my own. So yeah, it's only the 2 sprues really, so not a lot of pieces. Thankfully, water slide decals, so I'm always happy to see that. And it looks like they give you a couple of copies of each, which is always nice. So if you stuff up one, you've got some spares there. Alright, so we have this instruction sheet. Sort of gives you some details. Yeah, 1007 meters length. So it's a decent sized beastie, this one. Open it up, we've got the instructions in colour, which is nice. Doesn't look too complex. Of course, this is a glue kit. I don't think this one will just snap together and hold together. I think it will need to use some glue. But I think the assembly looks reasonably straightforward. Like whenever I do these sort of kits, it's about how I'm going to wire it and put the light in there and that sort of thing. So yeah. And they sort of, yeah, again, give you the colour call-outs. Oh, that's interesting. So they've got what thruster, the colour the thrusters are at different speeds. So, okay, I might see if I can get some RGB LED action happening in there, because that'd be interesting to kind of emulate the different speeds if I could. But I won't know until I actually have a look at the kit and how much room I've got in it. But it is a very cool looking spaceship, very sleek sort of looking thing, and of course it is in white, but I've got a pearl white SMS paint that I want to use for it, so I think that'll give it a bit more of an interesting finish. Alright, so the next step is for me to start cutting stuff off sprues and do some dry fit assembly just to see how I'm going to go about painting it and also lighting it. I've roughly put one of these together, and it's literally just held together with blue tack, tape, hopes and dreams, and I expect it'll half explode once I pick it up. So it does sit on a stand. The stand's a little bit kind of clunky, I reckon. It's not really that great, but at least they provide you with a stand. Now, as for the rest of it, there's some details I've had to omit just because they really need to be glued in. So there are actual pieces that sort of fit inside here down this trench. And there's also some very small sort of details that stick on the front there. So the assembly of this kit is quite interesting and is quite problematic when it comes to lighting. So I'm going to sort of slowly try and disassemble this thing and explain why. And a lot of that, it's no fault of the maker, I guess, the designer of the plastic kit. It's probably more around the design of the craft itself. So there are going to be some seams I'm going to have to deal with, and there's sort of some areas where it's really easy to paint them separately, and then there's other areas that are a little bit difficult. So let's try and here we go. This is where things start coming apart. So I might start with this bit here. Now, this bit with the bubbles and everything, that's a separate piece, and I'm going to have to sort of paint that separately. And then you have these sort of rear thrusters. Now, I've checked with these rear thrusters, I could fit an RGB LED in each of those. However, the bad news is these top engines, they're actually going to be too small. So, and again, there's like this area here which is painted in a dark sort of metal colour, and then these two thrusters on the side of white. And I'm going to show you that I did actually try. So you can see that's an RGB LED, and I've put that as forward as possible. And if I put the other piece on, the clamshell, you can see it ain't going to fit. It just isn't going to fit. And I wouldn't want the RGB LED that close anyway, because by the time I put the the cap on it, the light's going to be too close, so it's going to have a really, it's going to have a hot spot, which I don't really want to do. I want to sort of diffuse it a bit. So that's really disappointing. I tried, grinding out as much plastic as I could. But I was just getting too close to the edge, and when I hold the plastic up to the light, I can see it almost burned through in a couple of areas. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do the RGB lighting I thought I might be able to do. However, it's not going to stop me from just doing sort of plain white LEDs, because they're a lot smaller. So these ones here, I'll have no problem sort of fitting them within the thrusters. So I just want to work out how I'm going to go about doing that. So it will be lit. Unfortunately, I won't be able to have the changing colours for the thrusters. So I'm going to have to pick a colour, I think. So anyway, that's a bit disappointing. I should say it's good having the two kits, just because worst case scenario, if you stuff one up, you've already got you've got the other one. But also it makes it a bit easier for me to sort of see where the wiring's going to go, and I can also experiment with the with one of them, and then work out what I'm doing for the other version of the kit. Alright, now while I've got this together, I really need to sort of work out how I'm going to feed the wires. So I'm going to get a Gundam marker out and just mark points on them, on these thrusters, just so that I know that they are in fact going to be hidden when I get the wires fed through. I should also say you probably can get smaller RGB LEDs, but the problem is I won't be able to solder them. You know, I'm sort of maybe 20 years ago I could have done that, but not anymore. I need to work out where does that. I'm thinking I might feed the wires into this round bit, because ultimately they can go straight down into this bit and then out the bottom where I'll have a post hole. So it's going to be there somewhere. So you can see I've just stuck it together with blue tack, but you know, it works, so can't complain. Alright. Now, these thrusters here, go back to the one I was originally showing you, these pieces sort of slot in. This slots into the top of the hull, and then these slot into this piece. So if I take that off, you can sort of see those slots there. It's going to be interesting to see if I can feed the wires all the way through that way. Yes, I think this is going to be a lot of trial and error, this one. So I think through here it's actually a solid bit of plastic, and drilling through that's going to be really, really interesting. Alright, anyway, I've got to sort of look into that in a bit more detail. So that's the upper deck. The bottom deck is, I guess, a lot more sort of problematic, as you can see. So these intakes, I'm not going to light them. No need to light those. I think they'll be fine as they are. They're sort of made up of two pieces that sort of go on the side here. Now it's this bottom bit that's really problematic. So if I'll take that out, this is made up of way too many pieces, I reckon. I kind of understand why they went down the way they did with some of it, but other areas it's kind of like, yeah, I'm sure there was a better way of doing it. Not that I know, I'm no model kit engineer. I just build these things and complain about them. So we've got this top piece here, and if I take that off and take some of this blue tack out, the whole thing will probably fall apart. So there's this front piece that's separate. Okay. And then there's this whole sort of area here, which has these two parts, which, you know, I don't know why they didn't just make this one bit. They've made it two bits, and it just seems a bit silly. I understand, I mean, maybe it was moulding restriction, I don't know, but if I take these two bits out together, I think I'll end up gluing them, and so they should sort of sit like that. And then you know, this is all painted sort of dark colours, and then of course it's contrast against the white frame of the outside. And then we've got this bit, which is two halves, and it's got these massive sort of posts holding it together. Now what I reckon I'll do is I'll actually sort of glue all of this as one piece, because we've got this awful sort of seam down the bottom here. Obviously that needs to be filled and sanded, because this should be all nice and smooth, so you can sort of see how messy that is. But I want to sort of do this as one whole piece, and then I want to see if I could just drop this insert sort of in from the top if I took out these beams. So it's all, yeah, pretty tight in there. This bit as well. I could probably glue that in place. That'll give it some stability, I think. It's not even a nice joint, nice clean joint you've got here. So this whole thing sort of seems a bit strange to me why they've gone down that path. But anyway, I will glue that in place and make that one piece. And I'll also glue this all together, this assembly. Now I know there are some modelers way better than I am. Certainly, you know, channels like Imaginary Doc and AME Griffey have done some beautiful builds of this kit, and I only hope to get to the level they are at. But because I've seen, you know, like Imaginary Doc did the lighting in this bit and lighting around the trench and all that sort of thing, I don't think I'll be going down that path. So I think I'm going to start off by gluing all this together. Worst case scenario, I can cut it all apart again. It's you know, nothing a good hobby knife can't fix, or a saw. So get it all glued together, and then I can start sort of determining the next steps. This backing plate that's got all the sort of detail that goes on the back, I have stuck that together. I've used a bit of Tamiya putty just to sort of set it in place, and then I've used some styrene cement to sort of hold it together. I'm not sure if this is going to work. I know I've still got some cutting and grinding to do before it'll actually fit in there properly. I've also glued the front, the back and the two sides together, and once that's all set up I'll be able to cut those middle posts out. Now I'm hoping I can drop the backing plate in behind here. I may have to do a bit of cutting or grinding to make it fit, but that's the plan. I'm hoping I can sort of drop that in place. The other thing I've been doing is working on the underside of the deck, and we have this logo here which sits fairly proud of the base, and you can see, you know, see how proud that is. Now to me it kind of gets in the way of the, you know, the sleekness of the thing. So what I've done is sanded the thing right off. So there is a decal that's going to go there, but yeah, I've just sanded that right back, and I just used, you know, carefully trimming the bulk of it off with my grinding tool, and then using a sanding stick to sand the rest of it. So there's some slight imperfections in there, but most people looking at it, you would never know. And it is the underside as well, so most people aren't going to ever see it or notice. So I'm going to do that on both of them, so it'll just be the decal as opposed to the sort of embossed version of the logo. Okay, I've started some work on the lower hull. So you can basically see I've got a cavity in there. You'll see when I put together the other one, there's actually cross members that go across to hold the sides together. I've actually sort of glued it all together and then cut those out. And I've also made sort of a bit of a modification to this. So this is the insert piece. It's actually made up of two pieces. Why, I've got no idea, but anyway. So I kind of joined it at the back with some Tamiya putty while it was in place, and then glued it at the front. So the way this works now is that I can paint this separately, and it sort of clicks into place. It will need a little bit of super glue just to hold it in, but it means that I can paint that whole piece separately. I don't sort of have to worry about masking all these little holes in here. So that is a good way forward, I think. The only problem is that the top piece up here, which goes like this, I won't be able to get this seam or this join here dealt with properly, which I'm kind of a bit annoyed about. But basically, you know, I either paint this all up and then mask all this, which I reckon is going to be a pain in the neck, and then sort of seal it up. So I'm kind of taking the way out that this seam along the top here is not going to be as visible as, say, a seam along the side or on the front. And you can sort of see that in the image here. Like, you're hardly going to see the top part of this lower deck. So I think that's the compromise I have to make there. So that's that one done. Let's have a look at how I went with the other one. So we've got these two pieces here, and I'll just use some Tamiya extra thin. And I apologise, I am competing with the sulphur crested cockatoos again. They are making a racket. So just get a bit of glue in here, and these are the cross members that I'll end up taking out. Now I've glued them in place just because I want it to be as sturdy as possible while I'm getting all the glue down. This seam here definitely needs to be cleaned up. It is pretty ordinary. Alright, so got that sort of setting up. Now for this piece here, I'm going to remove this little peg, and this peg holds in one of these insert pieces. So in order for me to be able to remove this nice and easily, I'm going to need to remove that pin. And of course that is just a matter of snipping it off, and then we can glue this in place. Actually, before I do that, I might do the front first. The front's got a few more sort of keys and stuff in it that make it obvious where it's supposed to go. Just running extra thin cement along the join there. Now what I found with the other one was that once I'd sort of got all the glue in place, I had to do a little bit of, you know, just a little bit of adjustment here and there just to try and line it up as best as possible. Like, the tolerances in this kit are not sort of at a Bandai level or, you know, Tamiya level, that sort of thing. I mean, it's reasonably good. It's not like there's massive gaps or massive steps or anything. It's just, yeah, the way they've designed the kit, it is, yeah, it's not sort of shake the box and a model comes out. You have to work with this one a little bit more. Let's see if we can get a bit of glue in this one. Alright, so I'm just letting that glue sort of set up a little bit, and then I can start sort of lining things up better. So let's get this side sort of sorted. It's a little bit tricky, it may need some putty work, but the other thing you'll notice is there's a bit of a step at the end here. So what I ended up doing on the other one was just using a bit of Mr. Hobby dissolved putty just on those sort of ends there, just to level it out a bit more. So I'm actually going to leave that dry, and I'm going to give it a good 24 hours to set up, because I really need to put these two pieces sort of in place in order to attach them. And the reason for that is because the sort of location tabs, I guess, of this is not really flash. It's a little bit vague. If a model kit can do that, is capable of doing that. Well, I could probably almost guess. But no, I think I'll wait till I get it in place. But one thing is, I'll have to remove these because it'll no longer slide in place with those wings on it. So these are just like little locator tabs. So they go bitey-byes. Alright, so I'm going to leave that dry, and then I can sort of show you how I set this piece up. I've given the glue a good 24 hours to dry. Obviously lots of seams I need to clean up, but the first step is to actually remove these inner pegs here. You need to be sort of careful with these. Once you make the first cut, it sort of releases a lot of the pressure So you just want to sort of cut it carefully because I don't want to sort of undo all the gluing that I've done. So got that one side out. I can get the other one. Going with my other nippers and sort of clean this up a little bit. Now, a lot of sort of getting rid of these pegs in here is to do with being able to get this back piece or inset piece in, but it's also because I'm going to have a post going up through the middle, so, and I want to set that with epoxy, 2-part epoxy putty. So I want to make sure I've got plenty of room in there to set the putty. Okay, yeah, looks like it's still holding together, so that's all good. And again, just going in there with my other nippers just to clean it up a little bit. Okay, so we now have that, which means I should be able to take these pieces now and set them in place. This doesn't have to be pretty, it's purely functional, and it's really only to get the two pieces joined roughly, and then I can go in with some glue and or some styrene cement, I should say, and actually, you know, attach them properly. Set that up to dry just a little bit. So I'll leave that aside. I thought I'd need to leave it in here, but I think it's actually going to be better if I have it on the outside and keep it sort of flat and push it down. So let's get a little bit of glue on that. So I'll leave that to dry. But now I need to do some serious putty work on this bit here. So we've got big gaps in there. So for that, I think I might use some white Tamiya putty, and I usually just use a toothpick. Get some off and roll it into place. Doesn't have to look pretty, because I am going to be sanding it. Yeah, that'll be plenty for that top bit. And again, I'll leave that to dry. And so that's sort of essentially, you know, you can see this one, I've smoothed that off now. I still haven't decided what to do with the panel lines yet, but yeah, I think at least the bottom bit's sort of ready to go. Okay, this part has had some time to dry, and so has this part, so now I can test to see if this fits okay. And that seems to fit in there reasonably well, so you can see that sort of inset bit there. I did a little bit of research just to work out the panel lines on this bottom section, and I always thought it was sort of really smooth, but there is actually some panel line detail shown in the anime itself, and it's this sort of box thing. It's very hard to see on screen, but certainly this bit on the side here, I'll need to fill that in, and for that I will be using some Mr. Dissolve putty, just because some of these panel line areas are actually quite shallow. However, there is one that I will be sort of just scribing out a little bit more. Try and get that in there. Yeah, so there's this sort of rectangular piece with this cut out on the side here. That's what I'll be trying to hang on to, because that's what appears in the show. But this one up along the edge here, I'll definitely be filling that in. But anyway, this bottom bit with the putty here, it's time to give this a sand and see how it sort of came up. So when you're sanding, you know, curved surfaces, you never want to spend too long sort of just sanding in one spot. Obviously you'll get sort of some flat spots if you do that, so I tend to find these sort of sanding sponges really good for that, just because they've got a little bit of give in them, and they're better for doing sort of curved surfaces. Now, of course, until I actually prime this, I'll have no idea how smooth it actually is. Normally you can sort of run your finger over it as your first test. I'm just going to use a toothpick to sort of get some of the stuff down where the panel line is that I'm trying to fill. And this stuff I found, because it's so thin, it is really good for doing, you know, shallow panel lines if you're trying to fill those. Just a little bit here I want to fill. Alright, so I'll let them set up for a while before I do the other side of them, and then of course I can sand those back, rescribe those panel lines I need to. Okay, I've got to start on these engines here. So basically that's the outside of it, and this clips onto the hull. There is this inset piece which I'm going to drill out because I want to put some sort of mesh behind there, and I've got to work out how I'm going to be able to get a wire through here to basically come out where this point is. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably end up hollowing out I guess a bit of a channel, and then I can putty that up once I've got the LED in place. So there's a couple of things I need to do. I need to grind out this little hole here. There's also the corresponding peg. I think I'll just be able to sort of glue that in place. I don't think I'll necessarily need that peg there at least once I've got the LED installed. So I've sort of got to grind that out. I also have to light block this, so I'm going to have to paint it black in here, just so that there's no sort of light leaking out. This plastic appears to be very thin in places, so I think light blocking is going to be very much a concern. Do that, and also drill out this little piece here. So take this backing piece off, and that will be glued in place once I've sort of worked out what I'm doing with the mesh for that. Sorry, I'm going to be jumping around all over the place here. I've got sort of lots of sub-assemblies going on, and it might appear to be a bit out of order, but I want to start off these intakes. They're just sort of two pieces, just the end cap that goes on there. I've sort of glued them up, and then the next step is they sort of attach in this kind of awkward way on the belly. So I'll get them stuck in place, because really the only sort of paint difference is going to be on the end here, and you know, everything else is going to be white, so I'll probably end up doing that just with a brush. Okay, you can see here I've made the channel. I've sort of hollowed out this peg, and for the LEDs I'm going to use these 0603 warm white LEDs, and I'll colour them just using some clear paint, but you can see they're quite small, and they're really the only ones I'm going to be able to sort of get in this gap, especially in the other types of engines which actually have a smaller gap. So the idea is that the wire will lay down in that channel, and then I can sort of putty that up and get that sorted. Now this end cap, I've sort of taken the peg off, and I've also had to cut out a little bit for where the wire comes through, and so once that's sort of set in place, it'll be good. And finally I've hollowed this guy out, which is just a pain in the neck. Like, it's so small and fiddly, and I didn't want to sort of break it at all, so I've sort of hollowed it out. It's probably a bit hard to see on camera, but it is pretty rough. But I don't think it'll matter, because the inside of it I'm going to paint black, so you're probably not going to see that much of it anyway. So that's sort of where I'm up to. The next step is to actually work on the photo etch side of things, because what I want to do is use some mesh photo etch, because what I'm going for is something like this, where I've got that photo etch, so when the light comes through, it's not going to be just straight sort of light coming out the back. It's going to and I'm not going to lie, I sort of stole this idea off Imaginary Doc. They did something very similar, and it just looks so cool. So yep, I'm going down that path as well. So if you have a look at this, you can sort of see the layer of photo etch in there. It's sort of sitting behind the nozzle, and I haven't actually sealed this up yet. Obviously I need to set the LED in place. So if I remove this part, you get a better idea of what's going on. So it's literally the photo etch is just super glued behind the nozzle, and then the whole nozzle is super glued on the end there. So I'll take you through that process. The photo etch I'm using is this stuff by Edward, 4x4 hexagonal, 00109. So I've just cut a little bit off here, and the way I do this is I'm going to lay the bit of photo etch down on a tile here. Now it doesn't have to be a tile, but I just find this a little bit easier for me. So the reason I put it down tile is because it's going to make a bit of a mess. There's going to be a bit of, you know, super glue bleeding out and that sort of thing. So for this I'm using some Bob Smith Industries, and I'm using the gap filling medium stuff. So I will put it a little bit in a receptacle here, and then I will take the surround, okay, with the tweezers, and I'll dunk that edge in. And what it'll do is it'll form almost like a little bubble across. You can sort of see that. And of course, I don't really want that. So what I'm going to do is drop it down onto the photo etch. Make sure I get the photo etch on there. And then I'm going to basically move it around the tile, because what that does is it gets rid of that sort of bubble of super glue, because I do not want super glue filling all the holes of the photo etch, or otherwise it's going to defeat the whole purpose. So I tend to find this process works pretty well. It gets rid of that excess super glue, and now that sort of is sitting there. What I might do is, I've got these scissors that are specifically for, these are Tamiya if I remember rightly, yeah. These are photo etch scissors, so they are actually designed specifically for cutting photo etch. They look like sort of nail scissors, but they're not. I'm just going to cut this off. So I'll just set that aside just to ensure it's dry, and then I'll do the other one while I'm at it. Okay, once the glue has properly dried, I'm going to cut off as much of the excess I can with the photo etch scissors, and I want to follow it as close as possible to the edge of the nozzle surround. And so obviously I don't want photo etch sort of protruding out. This little bit here is a bit problematic. The inset's a bit difficult to get the scissors in there, so I'm just sort of chipping away at it as best I can. But the way to clean it up properly is to use a good diamond file. So again, this is a Tamiya diamond file number 400. Anyone's interested. So this is designed specifically for photo etch, for filing photo etch. And what I'll do is I'll file along the edge on an angle, and I'll file sort of away from the photo etch. And what this is going to do is get rid of any of those burrs that sort of remain in there, and hopefully give me a relatively clean edge. Once it's attached to the rest of the engine, I will be doing some more filing and filling and that sort of thing, but I think it's probably worth trying to get as much of the photo etch sort of flush with the surface as possible at this stage. Alright, let's see if we can clean this up with a knife as well, just to clean up some of this debris on the side here. I think that's reasonably good. Okay, so what we have is, I'm going to try and grow it. Maybe if I put it on tweezers it might be better. So you sort of get an idea of what it looks like. That's what it looks like on the back. And now we can glue that onto the body of the engine. So I'm just going to get this ready to line it up. Make sure we've got it around the right way. And this time I'm going to get some glue on the leading edge of this. And I'm using the same glue that I did for the photo etch. So you can see that layer there of photo etch, but I reckon once I get some putty in, hopefully that'll sort of disappear. And then of course we've got the cavity in there that I can set up the light, the LED, and I think I'll need something to diffuse the light as well. But basically that's the sort of process I'm up to at the moment. So I'll go ahead and do that with the rest of them. I can show you one of the other types of engines. You can see these have a kind of a different shaped outlet on them, but exactly the same process. So photo etch on the back, just super glued in place, and then I'll be able to sort of get some putty in there and clean up that joint. So I'll go ahead, do the rest, and then we'll be back for the next step. Okay, it's time to start wiring up some lights, and before I do, I just want to talk about the sort of painting I've done in there. So I started with a SMS Black Surfacer primer, so you can sort of see the black overspray in there, and then I painted the Hyperchrome, just the cold tone I think it was. So that's just for light blocking and maybe at least reflect a little bit of the light down the, you know, into the back of the nozzle there. You can see I've got my channel, the wires are going to come out. So I'm just going to stick this here with some blue tack. And the other thing that I've done is I've taken the LED and I've dunked it in some Tamiya clear. So in this case, X27 clear red. Now if we have a look at the instructions, we can see there's 3 different lighting modes or 3 different sort of engine modes, I guess. What's this? This is like full speed. This is battle and cruising, I think it is. So you've got basically I've got the red, blue and white. Now I'm not going to do one with white engines, I think that's kind of boring. I mean the rest of the thing's white. So I'm going to do one in blue and one in red. And so this one's the red one. For the blue lights I'll just dunk the LEDs in Tamiya X23. Now you literally just dunk them in and let them dry. So if we light this up, you'll be able to see what it looks like. Just literally looks like a red LED. And so the next step is to work out where it needs to sort of sit in here. So it's basically going to be stuck somewhere like that. Now what I want to do is have the LED as sort of far back from the end here, because that'll allow the light to sort of spread out a little bit. And I'm actually going to put something to diffuse the light at the other end. But if you put it up really close to the end, you get a extreme hotspot, which I don't really want. So to stick this there, I'm going to use just you know, some of the UV resin. Just make sure I've got this lined up properly. Get my UV torch here ready to go. So I'm going to dunk the LED in the resin. Try and sort of set it up where I want it. And then what I'm going to do is, just before I put sort of more resin into stabilizer, I just want to make sure the LED is sort of aligned properly. Yeah, so I reckon that's going to be pretty good. Now you can see it's got a pretty savage sort of hot spot there at the moment, but that's alright, we're going to deal with that. So first of all, I want to put a bit more resin in here just to really make sure that that light isn't going to go anywhere. The other thing I want to check is to make sure that the top piece will still fit on okay. Just want to make sure there's nothing sort of hindering that, and that looks pretty good. I think we're okay for that. So now the next thing is to come up with some way to diffuse the light at the end of it. And for that, I'm just going to cut out a piece of this, which is just tracing paper. It's literally like from a craft store. It's this was just cheap and nasty sort of kids tracing paper, but it works really well. It's nice and thin. You know, I'm going to glue it in place just using some Testors clear cement. Cut out a small piece of it that should fit okay. So I just want to try and work out which orientation I need to get it in, and then actually I won't get the glue ready to go, I think. So I think that'll line up okay. So I'm just going to literally just dunk this bottom of it in the white glue there, and I mean, you could use super glue. I mean, really this is just to sort of hold it in place. Yeah, so see how that's way better. That's way better. Now the last thing I need to do is to get this in place. And this will help sort of clamp in the diffuser a little bit too. Okay, so now I'm going to try and get some glue in here. Alright, so still looking pretty good. So I think I'll let that set up, and then I'll use probably a bit of putty just to hold the wires in along here, and then I'll be able to sand all this down. I think there's going to be a lot of sanding to do. I'm probably going to end up losing a lot of the panel lines, but I think that'll be alright. So anyway, I've got a lot more of these to do, so I'll do the rest of them off camera, and yeah, then I'll sort of show you the cleanup work I do with the puttying and stuff, and hopefully get it to a point where they look reasonable. Okay, I've done some putty work on the engines, so you can sort of see where I've done the sanding. Still a little bit more work to go, but it's pretty close. So I want to talk a little bit about the putty products that I use, and of course that's after I've sanded it. Before I sand it, it looks like this. It's quite rough, and you know, you can see there's quite a large amount of putty being put in there to cover those gaps, and a lot of this detail I'm actually going to end up losing, but I'm not too fussed about it. You know, if I have to rescribe lines, then that's no drama, but it's more about just getting a nice sleek look on the engines. So a little bit about the putty products that I use and when I use them. So I've only sort of recently got into using Mr. Dissolve Putty, and I find this stuff's really good for filling in really fine sort of gaps, like panel lines, if you want to cover up panel lines and that sort of thing. So I tend to use this for the really fine stuff. For stuff that's a little bit larger, I use Mr. Surfacer 500, and sometimes this needs to be applied in layers, just so that, you know, you may need to build it up because it does shrink. So does the Mr. Dissolve Putty. All these putties shrink a little bit when they, you know, when they cure. So that's sort of for gaps that are a little bit bigger, but you know, still not massive. And then for the bigger gaps, I use the Tamiya putty. This is the white stuff. The grey stuff is for really big gaps, but I find that this stuff works pretty well for most of the gaps I've got in this kit. So that's just a little bit about the putting work. Obviously, I've still got a bit of sanding to do, and I will give these a primer coat in grey just so that I can see how well my putty work, you know, how well it went. I've done quite a bit of work off camera. These engines, you can see I've done the priming, the initial priming, and then sort of gone through clean up with a whole lot of putty. So as much as I thought I'd sort of sanded it down really well, when I laid down a grey primer, of course I saw lots of issues. Now I suspect there's still going to be issues, but I kind of think I'm getting you know, there's less and less progress being made every time I do it. So I'll probably end up just priming these and live with any of the small issues I've got. So of course there's the two different types of engines. I'm using the dissolve putty for sort of some of the smaller gaps. So you can sort of see that on the tops there. I haven't sanded that yet. But yeah, so a combination of Mr. Surfacer 500 and the Mr. Dissolve putty. Now these bottom bits here have proven to be quite tricky, and you can see I've got some putty on the top here. So unfortunately the recording I did of it, all the footage was out of focus, so it's not really worth showing. But what I've done here is I laid down some Mr. Surfacer 500, so just a bead on the top, and then I let it dry for about 2 hours. So it was still malleable. It wasn't wet, but it was malleable. And then what I did was I put the top over, like so. And the reason for that is to help reduce the gap that's here when the putty's not there. Of course, it's a bit hard to see now, but yeah, there's actually a bit of a sizable gap. So what I'll do is I'll sand the edges off there that you can see, and I'll be ready to give this a primer. I'm going to prime it just to check the panel lines are okay and the sanding that I've done, so I'll probably do that all in grey. The reason I'm not just gluing the top in is because of this insert piece, which there's sort of no way of getting that in there and getting it lined up properly without sort of taking this top off. So it's unfortunately I'm going to have to sort of paint all this and then stick it together with a bit of super glue. This seam here will hardly be seen. I think the problem's probably going to be at the back, but I'll probably just end up using a bit of super glue or something just so I don't have the risk of styrene cement messing with my paint job once I've painted it up. The other thing that I need to do is drill a hole in the bottom here for the piece of tubing I'm going to use. So this is a bit of aluminium tube. It's what is it, 3mm in diameter. So it's just enough to get a couple of wires down there, but essentially that will be drilled sort of somewhere like that, and that will go into the base, which I've been preparing here. These acrylic gift boxes is what it looks like before it's sort of all puttied up and drilled into, but because they're acrylic, they're actually poured. It's not like a sort of full-on injection mold where they can get nice crisp finish on it. So normally there's like an area where you can see the acrylic's been poured in and it's quite rough. Now normally I don't worry about this because I drill a hole in the center and that's where the post goes, but for this one I actually want the hole on one of the sides, so I've had to putty this up. It's taken a bit of work, as you can see, and you can see the imperfections based on where the putty is sort of visible there. It's not a perfectly flat surface, unfortunately. So you can see the hole there that the post will go into. I've drilled the holes for both the USB socket and the switch, so that's all ready to go. And of course I'll paint that with SMS Surfacer Black, give it a matte coat, and that'll be ready to go. The other thing that I've done, and I may regret doing this, is sticking on these little fins at the back here. So this is the top of the hull, and there's these two little fins that stick on the back of it there. They are very fragile, and you can probably see there's not a lot of sort of meat holding them in place. I suspect I'll probably come a cropper there during painting or something where I end up knocking them off. Hopefully not, but anyway. So I think I'll leave the video here just because there's only sort of a few little things to do, like the post. I'll attach that using 2-part epoxy putty. So I'll just bed that down sort of in there so that's stable. Everything else is pretty much ready to go. A bit of a sand here and there, but essentially it's sort of ready for its primer coat. So in the next video, it'll all be about the painting and the decals and of course the final reveal. So till then, I'll catch you later.